Hey everybody, welcome to one of the biggest projects I feel like I've taken on since I started my YouTube channel, and that is finding dupes. That means low-cost drugstore alternatives to all of my MAC eyeshadows. I have 16 MAC shadows. I didn't really start even building my collection of those shadows until, I don't know, I'd been on YouTube for a while and I just kind of slowly started to get some. And I always felt like when I would go to the MAC counter, because these cost $14.50 for one eyeshadow, I would always try to find those shadows that were not like anything that I already had, you know? That's kind of what's made this whole experience finding dupes even more difficult, because I've tried to pick the unique shadows in the MAC collection, and now I'm trying to dig through and figure out, you know, what matches, what works, what doesn't, and it's taken me so long. I mean, I've been working on this for probably since early May. I've been trying to figure out MAC dupes, and there have been several shades that have really held me up over time. If you guys love these dupe videos, this is really where my collection helps me out big time, because, you know, it is giving me lots of options to look through and find those shades that really pair up. And one tip as well, just as you watch this video, and if you're trying to find dupes in your own collection, don't only go by what the products look like just side by side in the packaging, because they might look a little different, but you actually have to swatch them to see just how similar or different they might be. I really tried to come up with exact dupes, and I mean things that are identical. There are going to be some drugstore palettes that I'm going to recommend, and there's going to be like one MAC dupe in there, or in some cases there's going to be 3 MAC dupes in there. Let's get started. The first one I'm going to be talking about are actually 3. This is one of the ones I was most excited about because it's 3 MAC shadows and 3 colors in the drugstore palette as well. So the MAC shadows that I've found dupes for are Shroom. This is a light kind of pearly white shade. Cork, which is a satin shade, and it's just kind of like a medium, kind of a cool brown, I feel. And then the other one is Naked Lunch, which is a shimmery shade that has kind of a hint of pink. So the dupe that I found for those is actually this Wet n Wild palette, and it's called Walking on Eggshells. And you can see these two side by side. Walking on Eggshells has that light shimmery pearly shade, that medium kind of brownish color, and then another light shade that has that hint of pink. And when these are swatched, they do look extremely similar as well. I find that I enjoy the texture of the Wet n Wild shadows. I think it's better than MAC. And in all these swatches, I didn't use a primer. I wanted you to see how they actually performed without having to use some certain primer. So yeah, what you see is what you get in terms of these shadows, and I was just really impressed with Wet n Wild. My next set of dupes is amazingly another set of 3. They are dupes for Nylon, which from MAC is kind of, think of the texture of Shroom, only with a slight hint of a more golden-y tone. Another one that I am talking about is Satin Taupe right there, and that's a classic that a lot of people talk about in their MAC collections, but that's going to be your mix of like gray, brown, and metallic all rolled into one. And then the other one is Night Divine. This is a really shimmery gray that has the slightest hint, I believe, a teeny bit of blue in it. So I went through a lot of shadows, lots and lots, to find what I thought worked for each of these shades, because they each have their own little nuance that makes it sort of unique. But in the NYX Rock and Roll palette, this is where I feel like I found a dupe for each and every one of these. So Nylon, you know, this shade that's the first in this palette is really buttery feeling. It has a really nice texture that's very similar to Nylon. And then Satin Taupe as well in the center here, that nice neutral. And the one that was probably the most bizarre that I found, like, you know, it's that deep charcoal metallic gray with a hint of blue. Right down to the smallest detail, I feel like this shade is right on the money here from NYX. So that palette, if you get that palette called Rock and Roll, you're getting 3 MAC dupes in there. Now to a MAC shade that is probably one of my all-time favorite colors because it is so beautiful, and it's called Cranberry. And a way I like to use this shade is to you say you got a dark shade in your crease, a black or a gray or a brown or something like that, and then you want to warm up the look, and you apply a little bit of Cranberry kind of right up here as, you know, the color fades up. You just use it real lightly with a fluffy crease brush and your look has instant warmth, and it's just such a pretty way to use it. So anyway, that's Cranberry, and there's another shade that you can use just along the same lines, and it is from NYX, and it is a shade called Rust. So there's that color, and I mean, these two are so dead on dupes for one another. And I believe with a lot of the NYX shadows, even though I'm showing it to you here in a trio, I think you can also find a lot of these individually as well. Next shadow I want to talk about is called Twinks, and this is one of the more recent MAC shades that I've picked up. And I must say I like it a lot. It's got a little more richness to it than, say, Satin Taupe does. A little more brown. It's still very shimmery and all that, but this is more like a shade that could go in the crease or just kind of all over. It's a really pretty color. And there's a shade, an individual shade from NYX that I think is a pretty good match for that, actually, and it's called Volcano. It's got those same brownish qualities. It's highly shimmery. It really goes on with just that same amount of pigmentation like the MAC does. Next up, we're going to talk about MAC Carbon. Matte black is what this is. So this has no sparkle to it whatsoever. I don't know how many YouTubers I've seen talk about, you know, if you want your deepest, darkest black, you've got to get matte carbon. Well, guys, I'm sorry to burst bubbles here, but there is a shade from Wet n Wild that is even deeper black, and it makes my MAC swatch look like it's not that black. And it's from the Wet n Wild Blue Had Me at Hello palette, and it is the matte black that's in there. I don't know if there are matte blacks in any other Wet n Wild palettes, but this is the one that I have, and I swatched these and I thought, oh my gosh, the texture is just amazing. It goes on so much more easily with so much less effort to build up the black color. And I mean, I still like matte carbon, but this is the better black. And I have a lot of other individual drugstore black shadows that I could have said, okay, here's your dupe for matte carbon. But if I actually found something that was better, that's the one I'm going to show you. So even though this comes in a palette of 8 colors, that's the best black I have. This is right up there with Cranberry, I think, in being an all-time MAC favorite color, and it is called Beauty Marked. So I'm not knocking MAC because they do have some great shades, and this is one of those unique colors that you look at and you can see it just kind of, I feel like I'm got a new eye there. But this is so gorgeous. I mean, it's deep, it's dark, but as you can see, it has the little bit of plum and a sparkle in there. Okay, where am I going to find a dupe for that? It's right here in the Petal Pusher palette from Wet n Wild. Right here, it's a shade labeled Crease, and this is pigmented and rich, and like I said, I love that buttery texture that I feel like some of these Wet n Wild powders have. They blend easily, and if you can get a dupe, I mean, you're getting 8 other shades here as well for much less than you're paying for this color right here, and I really enjoy this palette, and I use this palette quite often. Next, I want to show you a shade called Tracks from MAC, and this shade looks absolutely stunning in the packaging because as it catches the light, it's like a purpley lavender with a lot of gold undertone going on there. And I must say, it's more pretty to look at in the packaging than it actually turns out to be in the swatch. So just keep that in mind. This isn't like one of those shades that I'm so in awe over, but I did find a shade that's pretty similar to it, and it's one of the Milani Baked eyeshadows in Fusion. And this is interesting because it is in a different format. This is one of those examples of a shade that looks different from the MAC in the packaging because this is lavender sort of marbled with gold, but when they are swatched, they do look a lot alike. Next is a matte shade from MAC. I feel like a lot of times when you hear people say matte and MAC, it's hard to get them, it's easy to get them confused, but this shade is called Blackberry, and I really like this shade. This is a very rich matte shade. After a lot of digging around, I found a shade that is a dupe for this, and it's from e.l.f. It's $1, guys, and it's in the duo called Berry Mix, and it's the deeper shade of the two, obviously. And it's a lot like the MAC. The MAC, I feel like, is a bit richer. It comes off with just a little more pigmentation, but they are so similar in color that you could build this up. This e.l.f. one with a primer builds up to be pretty much the same thing as MAC. I think MAC's Star Violet is beautiful. Metallic, it's got purpley pink tones to it. It's so, so pretty. I mean, if you pack this on your lid or you use this to kind of blend out a deeper shade in the crease, it's so pretty. But there is something you can spend less on, and it is the duo from Hard Candy Baked Eyeshadow in Secret Rendezvous, and it is the deeper shade of the two, and these swatch to be pretty much twin sisters of one another. I enjoyed this duo actually quite a bit. The lighter shade is wonderful. So I'm happy that when I am recommending a shade that comes from a duo or a palette, I really like the palette as well, and I would recommend picking it up. This is one of the first MAC shades I ever purchased, and it's called Sketch. And this has been sort of a difficult shade to find a dupe for because, okay, it's not totally matte, but it's not super shimmery either. And while it looks like kind of a plum, it has a certain amount of brown to it. A brownish plum is what this is. It's very deep. It's a nice contour shade. I went round and around trying to find the best shade I could, and it comes from a CoverGirl palette. It's the eye brightening shadows that they've made for different eye colors. This is the one for greens. It's called Vivid Greens, so 4 green eyes, and it's this shade right here at the end. It really, really is a dead-on match, if not a little more, this is a little more soft. The CoverGirl one is a little more blendable. Now we're getting to the shades that were the ultimate, most difficult shades to find dupes for. And you might be surprised because these colors aren't like the most, you wouldn't think they're the most unusual shades ever. But like I said, there are a lot of little details, a lot of little nuances when you're swatching and trying to find dupes that can make it so hard. A shade that I have from MAC here is a matte color called Handwritten. It's a nice deep brown, but when you start looking through your browns, you'll find that some are cooler, some are warmer, some might have a little bit of pearly, you know, pearlescent shimmer to it. Some might be a little lighter, darker. There are so many browns that are made in the world of eyeshadows. So finding this one was so hard, and this held me up on making this video. So you can blame that eyeshadow if you want to. There's a shade in the Revlon Color Stay quad here in Coffee Bean, and it would be that deepest, darkest shade down there. It's as close as I could get, guys. I mean, if I'm looking for a dupe for Handwritten, when I run out of this or I don't feel like using it anymore, this will be the one I will go to for that similar look. And finally, the ultimate troublemaker of the whole bunch, number 16. This is a shade from MAC called Woodwinked. This is really popular, and this is actually more unique than it looks, because when you swatch this shade, this is very metallic, but it's not brassy. There are so many golds in my collection that I felt like I would swatch them side by side with Woodwinked and think it looks like, you know, some sort of brass fixture on your door or something like that. You know, it just was too brassy. It had too much orange in it. This doesn't have a lot of orange tone to it. It is a soft golden color that has a lot of just neutral qualities to it. And so swatching my buns off, and then finally I came to Butternut. This is a quad from e.l.f. and that color right there in the corner is actually super duper similar, and it just kills me because I'll try everything I've got and then I come to my $1 e.l.f. quad, and what do you know, there it is. There's the dupe color there. So I'm satisfied with that. It takes a lot to get me satisfied with these dupes because I've held off on making this video so long because I wanted them to be as close as they could be for you. And I know I could have opened up a Coastal Scents palette and probably found a dupe more easily because you've got such a range and such a, you know, those tiny variations I'm talking about in colors can be found in those palettes. But if you only want 1 or 2 shades, one of those palettes could be more expensive than a MAC shadow. You know what I mean? One of those palettes might be $20, and if you're just going for one, then you know, you lose that bargain aspect, I guess is what I'm saying here. So I wanted to show you what you could pick up from the drugstore or order from a, you know, drugstore discount type website to get shades that you don't have to spend $14.50 for. I gotta say, it's almost makes you a little bit like, oh my gosh, I really spent that, now that I'm finding some shades that are even better than MAC, you know what I mean? So it kind of makes you regret your purchase. But anyways, thanks again for watching. Have a great day, and I'll see you again soon.